Recent news about Silicon Valley Bank, First Republic, and Signature Bank failing is causing a lot of uncertainty in the markets. Even large financial institutions like Goldman Sachs are raising their forecast of a recession taking place over the next 12 months to 35%. Meanwhile, buyer's remorse is increasing rapidly. In fact, according to a recent survey, 73% of home buyers said that they actually had regrets about buying their home. And 9 out of 10 homeowners who bought a home in the last 3 years say that they were unprepared for the extra costs of maintaining and financing their property. Now, the reality is that many of these surprises can actually be avoided as long as we account for them up front. And since purchasing a home is typically the single largest investment that a person will ever make, it's worth taking a little bit of time and digging into the details because we want to create successful homeowners so that buying a home is a blessing, not a curse. According to the recent survey, only 35% of homeowners say that they had no feeling of buyer's remorse after buying their home. And in 2019, with the same version of the survey, 65% of respondents said that they felt no buyer's remorse. So the buyer's remorse has basically doubled here over the last 3 years. And even with the median sales price falling to $355,000, which is down 1.8% year over year, homes are still up roughly 30% in the last 3 years alone. So it would make sense that buyers have that little feeling of remorse or they feel like they've overpaid. But to be fair, mortgage rates during this time frame were hovering in and around 3%, which was not only a record low, but it drastically improved affordability. And to drive that point home a little bit, take a look at the mortgage calculator on the screen. We take the median priced home at $355,000 with current mortgage rates at 6.75%. That will give you a monthly payment of $2,300 per month. Now, on the same $2,300 a month budget, but with a 3% interest rate, you could actually purchase a home that's $550,000. So it gives you nearly 200 grand more in purchasing power. And the reason I mention that is because these low interest rates really fueled speculation and it pulled a ton of demand from the future. So buyers that may have waited a few more years to buy, they decided to get involved in the market early because these mortgage rates had a dramatic impact on the monthly payment. Now, what happens a lot of times as buyers, myself included, is we tend to get hyper-focused on the monthly mortgage payment, and then we overlook some of the operating costs of a property. So if we take a look at this long list with all of the items that surprise newer homeowners, I think it's going to be pretty eye-opening. Now, we have property taxes and insurance on here. These are housing expenses that are typically accounted for when you work with a mortgage broker or a loan officer. So even though you shouldn't be surprised by these actually made the list. And my assumption is that both property taxes and insurance have likely increased over the last few years. And that could be what's a little bit of a shock. Now, I'll touch on a couple of these items, but one that really stood out to me here is utilities. And I've talked about this in prior videos, but I think it's super important because utilities will typically add up to more than people anticipate. And when you go from renting to owning, a lot of times there's more utilities that you're required to pay. So in many cases as a tenant, you may not have to pay for things like garbage, water, and sewer, but as a homeowner, you will have to. So it's really important to account for that, maybe make a few phone calls to the local municipality so you can figure out who is the utility provider and what that actual monthly cost will be. And in addition to water, sewer, and garbage, you're also going to have to account for gas, electricity, cable, and internet. And those monthly expenses can really add up. It is not uncommon to see monthly utilities cost anywhere from $300 to $700 per month. Now, a couple big ticket items that are important to mention, we have roof work, appliance issues, HVAC, and renovations. Now, over the last few years, the cost of materials and labor has gone up dramatically. So these are big ticket items that we need to pay close attention to prior to actually purchasing the property. One of the ways you can do that is by getting inspections done. So a general home inspection will typically look at the roof, they'll look at the appliances, they'll look at the HVAC system. And what will happen is if something is not in optimal working order, they'll say, please defer to a specialist. And so in some cases, depending on the situation, it's a good idea to get a specialist. Like, in other words, get a roofer out there, have them take a look at the roof, have them give you a bid to complete those repairs. If your HVAC system for heating and air is not functioning properly, maybe get an HVAC contractor out there because a roof, for example, might cost you $10,000 to $20,000 to replace and an HVAC might be $7,000 to $10,000. So these are bigger ticket items. And if you figure out up front that any of these items have an issue, it may give you more leverage to negotiate price and terms. Now, other than uncovering some of these items and surprises, I think it's a really good idea to account for them as well in a monthly budget. One of the ways you can do that is the same way investors analyze a property. This is just a screenshot of a rental property analysis spreadsheet that I like to use. It's completely free. I'll go ahead and link to it in the show notes, but it basically itemizes all of these expenses. So it gives you a framework to work within. Now, even if you don't plan on turning your property into a rental, this is a good exercise to complete because it'll give you a really good idea or benchmark of what that property will actually cost to operate. So you can see on this one, I'm accounting for things like property management fees, leasing costs, maintenance reserves, utility taxes, insurance, and even lawn care. Then you take a look at the total expenses, the net operating income, your total mortgage payment, and then it gives you a net cash flow. So this spreadsheet will actually help you calculate net cash flow, cash on cash return, internal rate of return. It's extremely useful. You can see that with this deal, the net cash flow was only about $8 a month, so it did not pencil very well. Now, for those of the home buyers that had regrets, here are the most common things they would have done differently. So they would have purchased a home that requires less maintenance. About 42% of respondents said that. Maybe they would have purchased something newer or something that would have been renovated so that there's not a whole lot that they have to do around the property. 33% said they would have negotiated a better price or contingencies on their home, which of course would have been very challenging over the last few years with interest rates at about 3%. 29% said they would have purchased a less expensive home. And then 27% said they would have actually waited longer to buy a home. But to my earlier point in the video, with mortgage rates being as low as they were, it pulled a ton of that demand from the future, causing people to get involved a lot earlier than they otherwise would have. And I would argue that there probably is an opportunity cost there because at the moment, even with home prices falling a little bit, the interest rate has a larger impact on the monthly payment than the current price reductions that we're seeing. All right, that is going to wrap it up for today's video. If you have found the information useful, please consider liking, subscribing to see more weekly videos on the housing market, and we'll see you next time. Take care.